Maybe you're listening to this in silence, somewhere between exhaustion and the urge to disappear for a while. Maybe no one really knows what you're feeling. Maybe you even think there's something wrong with you for feeling too much, or worse, for not feeling anything at all. The truth is, a lot of people feel this way right now, tired, overwhelmed, confused, lost within themselves. And deep down, some part of you already knows you need help. But between knowing and reaching out, there's a deep canyon made of doubts, fears, judgments, and that paralyzing feeling that nothing will work, that it's too late, that no one would understand, or that you wouldn't even know where to begin. But what if I told you that what you're feeling right now isn't a flaw? It's a symptom of everything you've had to carry for far too long. It's hard to ask for help, especially when we've grown up believing we should handle everything on our own, that suffering means weakness, and that falling apart is a sign of failure. The culture of performance taught us to hide pain, to mask exhaustion, to replace tears with productivity. But there comes a moment when the body speaks louder, when the heart grows tired, when the soul begs for a break. That's where real transformation begins, not when you fix everything, but when you allow yourself to be cared for, even without knowing how, even while afraid, even while doubting. Because simply saying, "I need help," is an act of courage. It's the first step out of the silent prison inside you. The good news is, you don't have to wait until everything is in place to begin. You don't need to have extra time, excess money, or a perfect life. Online therapy exists to welcome exactly who you are, right now, with your pain, your questions, your emotional baggage. It doesn't demand you be ready. It just needs one thing, that you're alive. And if you're here listening to these words, it's because there's still a part of you that believes, that holds on, that wants to breathe lighter, that longs to feel like yourself again. And that part deserves to be heard, with love, with respect, with care. A lot of people think they need to be at their worst to seek a therapist. That help only makes sense when everything has already collapsed. But that's not true. Therapy isn't just for when things break. It's also for when you want to grow stronger, for when you're doing okay, but feel like you could understand yourself more deeply, for when you've realized that mental health isn't a luxury, it's a necessity, and that self-care isn't selfish, and it's survival, it's healing, it's reclaiming your story, it's building a new way to live. In this video, you'll be guided through a journey of deep listening, emotional understanding, and inner reprogramming. You'll see how online therapy can transform your daily life, ease your emotional pain, expand your awareness, and help rebuild your trust in yourself and the world. We'll explore every aspect of this new way of caring for your mind. And along the way, you'll come to realize something essential. You are not broken, you are becoming. And asking for help is not weakness, it's wisdom. Because when someone reaches out for care, they're really saying to the world, I want to live with more truth. I want to understand myself. I want to be free. Take a deep breath. Your session begins now. For a long time, the image of therapy was tied to a quiet office, a comfortable armchair, a couch, and the soft ticking of a clock marking the minutes of a conversation. Psychological care seemed confined to a physical space, with fixed hours and people who somehow managed to fit that kind of service into their routines, budgets, and locations. And because of that, for a long time, access to therapy was limited, not just by financial issues, but by time, mobility, geography, and above all, the fear of being judged. But a silent revolution was underway. Slow, almost imperceptible at first, it gradually took shape until it became a real bridge between suffering and the care that once felt out of reach. This revolution has a name, a face, and a digital address. It's online therapy. It all began as an alternative, an adaptation for emergency situations, something that seemed less effective or less human than in-person therapy. But research, patient experience, and the testimony of thousands of therapists began to reveal a different truth. Connection, care, and transformation can also happen through a screen. In fact, for many people, the screen became a safe haven, a space where they felt freer to cry, to open up, to touch wounds they had never dared to speak about, without the burden of traveling, without the judgment of others' eyes, without the physical barrier that sometimes created more distance than closeness. And then came the pandemic. Abruptly and forcibly, the entire world was pushed to rethink the way it worked, studied, connected, and most importantly, took care of its mental health. What was once the exception became the norm. Therapists, patients, and platforms had to adapt. And what seemed temporary proved to be effective, deep, and transformative. For the first time in history, people in small towns, rural areas, or even in other countries could access professionals they truly connected with. Emotional care expanded beyond big urban centers and arrived in bedrooms, kitchens, and quiet living rooms where pain no longer had to wait. This change wasn't just technical, it was symbolic, it was political. Because when we make emotional care more accessible, we are saying that everyone deserves to be heard, that mental health is not just for those who can afford it, that it doesn't matter where you are, your pain matters, your process matters, and you deserve support. Online therapy didn't just democratize access, it validated the pain of those who once felt invisible. Today, we have tools that allow for therapeutic encounters with safety, confidentiality, ethics, and real connection. Specialized platforms, video sessions, therapeutic audio messages, guided meditation apps, even text-based therapy. Care has adapted to the reality of those who need it. Psychology listened to the world, and instead of resisting change, it welcomed it. It welcomed the shift, it welcomed the need, it welcomed the urgency. Of course, not everything is perfect. There are still challenges, technical limitations, lack of quality internet for many, difficulty concentrating in home environments. But those barriers are not greater than the transformation underway, because the most important part has always been there. Two human beings, one who needs to be heard and one who knows how to listen. That has never depended on the room. It depends on the connection. And now that connection can happen anywhere in the world, as long as there is a link, not just digital but emotional. The revolution of online therapy doesn't make headlines. It happens quietly on a phone screen, in the whispered relief of a confession that finally found space. It happens when someone says, "That was my first session," and feels lighter. When a single mother finds time between work and her kids to take care of herself. When a young person in a town without therapists is able for the first time to talk about what they feel. This revolution is made of real stories, and maybe yours is one of them. Even when the pain is obvious, even when the body is already screaming and the soul is begging for help, many of us still resist. We place therapy on a distant shelf, as if it were an extreme measure, something reserved only for serious cases. We repeat phrases like, "This will pass, and I'm just tired, it's not that bad. Others have it worse." And with that, we delay seeking help. We stay silent. We fake control. And we keep going, often for years, accumulating small internal collapses that one day turn into invisible breakdowns. But why is it so hard to ask for help? What makes us hesitate in front of something that could actually set us free? The answer doesn't lie only on the surface. Resistance to therapy is largely the result of centuries of stigma, misguided narratives, and social structures that equated mental health struggles with weakness, madness, or failure. Many of us were raised to believe that emotional problems are just a lack of discipline, of faith, or of willpower. We were taught to stay quiet, to endure, to never show vulnerability. We grew up hearing things like, "Boys don't cry," "Dramatic women are just exaggerating," "Teenagers complain for nothing," or "Older people should just be strong." These old voices echo inside us, and without realizing it, they become our own inner voices, sabotaging our access to care. There's also fear of the unknown, the idea of opening up to a stranger, of revisiting painful memories, of touching wounds we've ignored for years. Many fear not being understood, being judged, or confronting parts of themselves they're not ready to face. It's common to hear things like, "What if I start talking and can't stop crying? What if I don't know how to explain what I feel? What if they think I'm weak?" But the truth is, therapy doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require clarity. It doesn't require that you know where to start. It simply invites you to show up, just as you are, with everything you feel, even if you can't name it yet. Another powerful reason for resisting therapy is guilt. Yes, guilt for seeking help. Guilt for prioritizing yourself. Guilt for spending money or time on something that doesn't seem urgent to others. Many people, especially those who take care of others like mothers, fathers, caregivers, healthcare professionals, internalize the belief that taking care of yourself is selfish, that others must come first, and if there's anything left, then maybe you can take care of you. But mental health is not a luxury, it's not indulgent, it's a foundation. It's the structure that supports our ability to care for others, to work, to live. There's also the false idea that therapy is only for those who are sick, and that keeps many people away. The truth is, therapy is for those who live, for those who feel, who get lost, who want to understand themselves better, who want healthier relationships, who are navigating change, who want to grow. Therapy is a space of expansion, not just repair. And even when there's intense pain, that pain isn't proof of failure. It's a sign that something inside you needs to be heard with more compassion. We need to name these fears. We need to talk about them. Because when we bring resistance into the light of awareness, it loses strength. When we understand where it comes from, we can respond with honesty. I'm afraid of getting hurt, but I'm more afraid of staying numb. I'm ashamed to admit I'm struggling, but I'm tired of pretending I'm fine. I don't know where to start, but I need to start somewhere. And that's where everything begins to change. When fear becomes momentum, when doubt becomes a seed, when resistance turns into movement. If you've made it this far, it means there's already a quiet but powerful act of courage rising within you. And even if fears remain, even if your inner voice insists you don't need help or don't deserve it, or that it won't work, there is another voice, softer, that whispers, "What if it works?" Listen to that voice. That is your soul asking for room to breathe. If you've never been to therapy before, or if you're thinking about starting this process online, it's completely natural to have questions. What am I supposed to say? Do I need to prepare in advance? Will the therapist understand me? What if I freeze? What if I cry? What if it doesn't work? All of these questions are valid, and many of them come from an idealized image of what a therapy session is. Even today, some people still imagine therapy as either a cold, distant interrogation or, on the opposite end, as a mystical moment where everything is magically resolved. But the truth is much simpler and much more human than that. An online therapy session is first and foremost a meeting between two human beings, united by a shared commitment to look at you with listening, respect, and care. There is no strict script. There is no right or wrong. There is no judgment. You can begin by saying, "I don't even know where to start." You can say you're nervous. You can even remain silent for the first few minutes. And all of that is okay. The therapist is there to move at your pace, to honor your silences, to help you name what you feel, and to gently guide you toward greater clarity about yourself. The session unfolds in the time of your truth, not in the rush of your expectations. Practically speaking, the process usually begins with a few introductory questions. The therapist will want to understand what brought you there, learn a bit about your story, and check in on how you've been feeling. But don't expect a dry interview. Therapeutic listening is different from ordinary listening. It's a type of listening without interruption, without judgment, without quick fix advice. The therapist isn't there to tell you what to do. They're there to help you find your own answers. And that's what makes the process so powerful. It gives you back the authorship of your own life. In online settings, this encounter typically happens via video, usually through secure private platforms, but in some cases, it can also be through audio or even text messages, depending on the therapist's approach and the patient's needs. And yes, even at a distance, it's absolutely possible to feel connection, comfort, and presence. Many clients report that they find it easier to open up in online therapy. Being in your own space, surrounded by familiar things, can create a sense of emotional safety that supports the process. Some even prefer doing sessions from their bedrooms, wrapped in a blanket or holding a warm cup of tea, turning that moment into a personal care ritual. But we also need to be realistic. Not everything will be perfect. The connection might fail. There may be background noise, interruptions, distractions. That's why it helps to create a small ritual before your session. Choose a quiet spot. Let others in your home know you'll be unavailable. Silence your phone and prepare a space that allows you to listen to yourself. But even when something doesn't go as planned, the most important thing remains intact: the human connection. Online therapy doesn't rely on special effects. It relies on presence, vulnerability, and emotional openness. Another important reminder: you don't need to have a huge problem to seek therapy. A session can begin with a vague discomfort, a tightness in your chest, a conflict at work, a question about yourself, a sense that something's not quite right. Sometimes the biggest transformations begin with small conversations, with insights sparked by simple questions, asked with depth and care. Therapy is the space where you can be whole, without having to pretend to be strong, without hiding your pain, without needing to justify your feelings. It's common to leave your first session with a sense of relief. Relief for having started, for being heard, for realizing that it really is possible to begin building a new relationship with yourself. But it's also normal to leave with questions, with emotions stirred up, with your mind spinning. Therapy is not linear. It's not a straight staircase, it's a journey, with curves, detours, deep dives, and necessary pauses. And all of that is part of the process. If you've been waiting for a sign to begin, maybe this is it. The session doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be ready. You just have to be willing to listen to yourself with more honesty. And that small gesture may be the beginning of a great transformation. For many people, the idea of talking to a therapist through a screen can seem at first cold or impersonal. There's a fear that true connection won't happen, that the distance will interfere with the bond, or that the warmth of being heard will be lost because you're not in the same physical space. But something surprising is happening in the world of online therapy, something that data, personal accounts, and the lived experience of thousands of patients and therapists keep confirming. The screen, instead of creating distance, can offer protection. And more than that, it can actually deepen the therapeutic bond. Think for a moment about how many times you held back from saying what you truly felt out of fear of being interrupted. How often you avoided showing vulnerability because you were afraid of being judged, or how many times you stayed silent because the environment around you didn't feel safe enough to hold your pain. Now imagine being able to talk about yourself without leaving home. No traffic, no awkward glances in a waiting room, no anxiety about someone seeing you walk in or out of a clinic. That emotional privacy that online therapy provides goes far beyond physical distance. It reaches into an intimate space where shame and fear can slowly begin to soften. Being in your own environment can allow you to speak with more freedom, to cry without worrying about who's nearby, to open up with fewer defenses. Many clients say that in online sessions, they're able to access emotions they used to block, precisely because they feel safer. It's as if the screen creates a subtle bubble, a suspended space where masks come off more easily. This doesn't mean the connection is superficial, quite the opposite. What defines the depth of a therapeutic relationship isn't physical proximity, it's the quality of presence. And true presence transcends any distance. A good therapist knows how to create that presence, even from afar. They know how to hold space in silence, how to receive your words with care, how to validate your experience without pressure. The connection that builds over time is real, and more than real, it's healing. Because very often, the therapeutic relationship is where you may experience for the first time what it feels like to be heard without having to defend yourself, to be understood without needing to explain everything, to be accepted without having to please anyone. The screen doesn't limit this encounter, it just changes the format. But the essence remains a space where you can be whole. There's also another essential point: practical privacy. In a world where so many people share their pain on social media, where algorithms turn suffering into content, and where constant exposure is the norm, online therapy offers the opposite. A space that asks for no likes, demands no performance, records nothing, and shares nothing. Everything that happens between you and your therapist stays there, protected by confidentiality, by ethical codes, and above all, by a deep respect for your process. That care, that discretion, is a relief for anyone who already feels too seen, too judged, too exposed. Of course, for all of this to happen, it's essential to choose a qualified therapist, a secure platform, and a quiet environment. But once that space of trust is created, what grows there is a rare kind of intimacy, one that doesn't depend on touch or physical presence, but on authentic listening, genuine empathy, and mutual emotional availability. Online therapy is showing us that connection is not about physical closeness, it's about emotional presence. And the screen doesn't have to be a barrier. It can be a bridge between your pain and your relief, between your silence and your voice, between what you've been carrying and what you long to change. And that bridge, once crossed, can take you somewhere new, lighter, more conscious, and more true. The idea that therapy has to take place in a fixed office, at rigid hours, requiring travel and fixed appointments, no longer makes sense for a large part of the population. The reality for millions of people is marked by days consumed by responsibilities, by urgent family demands, by exhausting routines, by physical distance from urban centers, or by the simple absence of mental health services in their regions. And this is exactly where online therapy emerges as a real, practical and necessary solution. It breaks down barriers that, for decades, kept people away from emotional care. Imagine a single mother raising 3 kids, working 2 jobs, with barely any time for herself. Imagine a rural worker living in a remote area with no psychologists nearby. Think of a college student in a small town who feels ashamed to seek help in a place where everyone knows each other. Think of someone with reduced mobility, or someone who suffers from panic attacks that make leaving the house almost impossible. Think of healthcare professionals who spend the entire day taking care of others and only find a moment to breathe when night has already fallen. For all of these people, and so many others, online therapy is not just an alternative. It's the only real chance for care. The possibility of having sessions in your own room, in the space between tasks, with more flexible scheduling, represents a deep transformation in how we view mental health. And more than anything, it represents an expansion of what we call accessibility. Because accessible doesn't just mean physically nearby. Accessible is what respects your time, your body, your routine, your reality. Accessible is what adapts to what you can offer now, not to an idealized version of life that doesn't exist. Online therapy also supports consistency. Many clients used to give up or space their sessions too far apart because attending meant long commutes or rearranging their entire schedule. With digital sessions, it becomes easier to maintain the therapeutic bond, and that, in turn, amplifies results. Because transformation happens in continuity, it's not about isolated sessions, but about a gradual process where each conversation builds another step in self-awareness. Another crucial point is the care for those who care. Caregivers, frontline professionals, teachers, overwhelmed parents, all of these roles carry intense emotional weight, yet rarely find space in their routines to prioritize themselves. Online therapy offers a breath, a sacred moment in the middle of the chaos, a time of pause where they can finally talk about themselves, be heard, receive support, and replenish the energy they're constantly giving to others. There's also a positive impact for those living abroad, in other states or in different cultural realities. Online therapy makes it possible to find a therapist who truly resonates with you, someone who speaks your language, understands your culture, your dilemmas, your roots. It creates emotional bridges that in a local in-person model might be impossible to build. This geographic freedom not only expands access but also improves the quality of the therapeutic relationship, allowing the client to choose someone who can truly hold their story with care and depth. Of course, online therapy doesn't replace in-person care in all cases. There are situations where physical presence is important, necessary, or preferable. But the truth is that most emotional challenges can indeed be worked through effectively in the digital format, as long as there is commitment, ethics, active listening, and emotional presence. And for those who were previously excluded from therapy due to logistical, emotional, or geographical reasons, this option represents a personal revolution. The question, is online therapy for everyone, might need to be rephrased. Maybe the real question is, isn't it time we allow more people to finally have access to the care they deserve? Because in the end, online therapy isn't just a new format. It's a new path, a quiet path, but one full of power. A path that may be opening right now, right in front of you. Not every prison has bars. Sometimes it lives inside our mind. There are days when the simple act of getting out of bed feels impossible. Weeks when getting dressed, walking through the door, stepping outside becomes an almost superhuman effort. For some people, leaving the house isn't just a logistical matter. It's an internal battlefield. It's where anxiety, depression, panic, or emotional exhaustion manifest with full force. And in this scenario, as silent as it is devastating, online therapy becomes a vital resource. Because when pain prevents you from going out, care can and must come in. Imagine someone living with agoraphobia, who feels intense fear in open or crowded spaces, or someone grieving, emotionally fragile, unable to imagine exposing their pain outside their home. Think of a woman who survived violence and is afraid to walk alone. Think of a teenager bullied at school carrying shame in silence, or someone with severe depression, barely able to eat, barely able to describe what they feel. For these people, expecting them to seek help out there is often asking the impossible. In this context, online therapy is not a convenience. It's a matter of emotional survival. What used to be a barrier, the screen, the distance, the virtual space, now becomes protection. Therapy enters the home without intrusion. It holds space without pressure. It allows a person to be vulnerable in their own time, in their own space, with the comfort of turning off the camera if needed, of taking a deep breath without having to move. The session can happen with the client lying in bed, hugging a pillow, wrapped in silent tears, and all of that is valid, because the essence of therapy is not where it happens. It's what it makes possible inside you. There's a term that might capture this experience well: emotional accessibility. More than making care possible, it makes it emotionally feasible. When we're emotionally fragile, everything feels harder. The world seems too loud, too fast, too demanding. The mind closes in on itself, caught in spirals of guilt, fear, and insecurity. And that's precisely where online therapy opens a door. A small opening where light can begin to enter. A quiet reminder that you don't have to go through it alone. And that even without leaving the house, you can begin to move out of the place pain has held you in. It's important to understand that this process is not lesser just because it happens through a screen. It's not superficial, not fragile, not less effective. Quite the opposite. Many clients say it's exactly keen within the safety of their own space, that they're able to access inner content that would otherwise stay hidden. Talking about trauma, abuse, old fears, or tangled thoughts takes courage, but it also takes safety. And often that safety is found in the room where you sleep, in your living room chair, in the quiet after lunch, in the pause between tasks. It's the refuge where care finally finds its way in. Another key aspect that cannot be ignored is physical mobility. People with disabilities, the elderly, patients in recovery or undergoing medical treatment, all find in online therapy a way to maintain emotional care without facing extra physical challenges. It's a form of real inclusion, one that recognizes different lived realities and offers pathways adapted to each unique life. The message through all of this becomes clear. You don't have to be okay to ask for help. You don't have to be ready, strong, or stable. You just need to allow yourself to take that first step, even if it happens in silence, with your camera off, with a trembling voice, with your chest tight. The session begins when you choose to open the space, and that space can literally be your home. The screen is not a barrier, it's a passage, and through it a new way of living can begin, with care, with respect, with truth. For a long time, technology was seen as an enemy of mental health. People spoke, rightfully, about screen overload, digital dependency, the anxiety triggered by social media, and the effects of constant notifications on our nervous system. But like almost everything in life, technology also has another side. A side that, when used mindfully, can save lives. It can hold space, it can listen, it can offer access where before there was only silence. Instead of being the villain, technology, or when used with intention, becomes a powerful bridge between those who need help and those available to provide care. In recent years, dozens of digital platforms for psychological support have emerged. Some connect clients with therapists in real time through video, audio, or even written messages. Others work as marketplaces, allowing users to choose a therapist based on specialties, availability, and even pricing that fits their financial situation. There are also apps for self-awareness, emotional tracking, guided therapeutic journaling, tools to log mood, crises, thoughts, and progress. Emotional care has moved beyond the therapy room and now lives in the palm of your hand. This shift is profound, and it's historic, because for the first time, people in emotional pain can seek support the moment the pain hits. There's no longer a need to wait days for an appointment, stand in line, or travel across town. In many cases, all it takes is a click, a message, the courage to open an app and say, "I'm not okay." And that sentence I'd said right there can be the start of a radical shift, because once it's heard, validated, and received with care, the pain begins to reorganize. The inner chaos begins to take form. and naming what we feel is the first step toward healing. Technology also allows for different formats of listening, which is especially helpful for people who struggle to express themselves verbally. Sessions via written messages, for example, can help those who feel more comfortable writing than speaking. Voice diaries allow people to record emotions spontaneously throughout the day. Pre-recorded therapeutic audio offers a kind of remote presence, a form of care that can be accessed at any hour. These tools don't replace traditional therapy. They complement it. They expand it. They democratize it. They give care new shapes. It's important to remember that behind every reputable platform, there's a strong ethical commitment to privacy, confidentiality, and data protection. The best tools on the market use encryption, secure access, and private environments to ensure patient safety. It's also up to the user to do their part, check references, verify credentials, and choose carefully. But once trust is established, technology becomes a genuine space for healing. There's also a symbolic impact in this new reality. The idea that asking for help can be simple, that you don't have to hit rock bottom to reach out to a therapist, that a single click can change the direction of a life. This breaks resistance. It challenges the "this isn't for me" mindset. It brings closer those who once felt far away. And more than anything, it gives power back to the client. The power to choose, to start, to pause, to return, to adapt. Technology literally puts care in the hands of those who need it. Of course, not everything is perfect. There are limitations, risks, and necessary precautions. But ignoring the therapeutic potential of these tools would mean turning away from one of the greatest opportunities of our time. Because in the end, it's not the medium that matters, it's the connection it allows. And if that connection can begin, grow, and thrive through a screen, an app, a call, then we're facing something truly powerful. Because suffering doesn't wait, pain doesn't follow a schedule, crisis doesn't book an appointment. And that's why the ability to ask for help, in real time from wherever you are in whatever way you can be the difference between giving up and continuing on. Technology is quietly telling us, you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here, connecting you with someone who can listen. And that someone might be miles away, or just minutes from you. What matters is, they're within reach, right now. Some pain screams, but others only whisper. And those are often the most dangerous. They're the pains that hide behind social smiles, that camouflage themselves in productivity, that disguise as strength, adaptation, or normality. They're invisible wounds, the ones no one sees, but that slowly corrode from the inside. And when they're not acknowledged in time, they turn into illness, into breakdowns, into withdrawal, into ruptures, into a weariness so deep that the meaning of life itself seems to vanish. Waiting too long to seek help has a cost, and often, that cost is your peace. Many people spend years postponing emotional care. They tell themselves they'll look for help when things calm down, when they have more time, when the pain feels real enough, when everything else is resolved. But the paradox is cruel. The more care is postponed, the heavier the pain becomes, the harder it is to reach. What was once clear becomes confusing. The anguish grows quieter, but not gentler. It reaches a point where the person can no longer name what they feel. They're simply surviving, moving through the ruins of a well-being that never came. This delay is understandable. It's born from fear, from beliefs, from a culture that normalizes suffering. How many times have we heard, "Everyone goes through this"? How often have we minimized our own feelings because others have it worse? How many times have we silenced ourselves because we didn't want to seem fragile, problematic, or needy? The problem is, emotional silence doesn't go away. It builds. It transforms into physical symptoms, psychosomatic illnesses, unexpected outbursts, escapes, addictions, isolation. And most dangerously, it separates us from ourselves. Waiting too long to seek help isn't just risky, it's unfair to your own soul. It's like letting a wound get infected, even though the bandage is right there. It's like walking for years with a stone in your shoe, even though someone is willing to help remove what hurts. Asking for help doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're paying attention. It means you've realized that life is too big to be lived with chronic soul pain. That time doesn't heal everything. It just hides what was never treated. There's a huge difference between enduring and healing, between holding on and transforming, between postponing and choosing. And with every day you wait to start therapy, you miss the chance to rebuild with more ease. Not because the pain disappears overnight, but because the sooner we begin, the sooner we learn we're not alone. That there are words for what we feel, that there's understanding for what seems confusing, and that there is relief, yes, relief, even for the oldest, quietest, deepest pains. There's another cost to prolonged waiting, its impact on relationships. Those who suffer in silence often begin to withdraw from the people they love. They start reacting with irritability, with coldness, with distance. They begin to lose joy, the sparkle in their eyes, the desire to be with others. Unheard pain closes windows, it hardens the heart, it narrows life. And that affects family, work, friendships, all connections. Emotional care is also relational care. When we care for ourselves, we care for those around us. And the opposite is true. When we abandon ourselves, we end up pulling others into the same abyss. That's why it's urgent to say, well, don't wait. Don't wait for it all to fall apart. Don't wait for the collapse. Don't wait to lose sleep, appetite, or purpose. Don't wait until you've hit rock bottom. Don't wait for someone else to say, now you're allowed. The best time to seek help was yesterday. The second best time is now. And if this moment is unfolding in front of you, if this message is touching something in your chest, then maybe it's time to listen. To hear that quiet request inside you that's been ignored. To hear that part of you that wants to breathe again, that wants to feel alive. Emotional silence may have helped you survive, but it doesn't have to define your future. You can choose care. You can choose to be heard. You can choose to stop waiting, because there are people prepared to welcome you, because your pain deserves space, and because your life can't be put on hold any longer. Starting therapy is, in itself, an act of courage. But once the decision is made, a new challenge arises. How do you choose a therapist? How can you trust that the person on the other side of the screen will be able to truly listen, with respect, with ethics, with real presence? How can you tell if this is the right person to accompany you through one of the most intimate and transformative processes of your life? While this decision can feel delicate, it doesn't have to be a mystery, and knowing what signs to look for can help you find someone who not only meets your technical needs, but who genuinely makes you feel safe, seen, and supported. The first factor is professional training. A therapist should have a degree in psychology or another recognized mental health field, along with an active license or registration. In Brazil, for example, that means a CRP number. Be cautious of those offering therapy without academic credentials or legal regulation. There are many serious professionals across different approaches, but at the very least, you should expect education, licensing, and ethical responsibility. Therapy is not friendly advice. It's not self-help. It's not spirituality masked as science. It is a technical, in-depth process grounded in theory, method, research, and supervision. The second factor is the platform or contact channel. Choose trusted platforms that ensure data security, transparent scheduling, verified credentials, and clear communication. Avoid suspicious sessions held over social media without contracts, clear guidelines, or formal structure. Confidentiality is a core part of therapy, and the therapist must guarantee a protected space, even if it's digital. The best platforms prioritize privacy, stability, and real patient feedback. The third factor, and perhaps the most important, is the human connection. A therapeutic relationship isn't just built on credentials, it's built on connection, on emotional presence, on real listening, and you have every right to assess how you feel during and after a session. Did you feel safe, respected, free to speak openly? Was your pain validated without judgment? Did the therapist listen or interrupt? Did they impose ideas or help you explore them? Did you feel they genuinely cared or just followed a script? All of this matters because healing doesn't come from technique alone, it comes from connection. Sometimes it takes time to find the right therapist, and that's okay. It's normal to try more than one professional, to explore different approaches, to feel things out. Therapy is a journey, and part of that journey includes the right to choose, to change, to say, this isn't working for me. That's not being ungrateful. It's being responsible with yourself. It's recognizing that your emotional health deserves the best care, and that the best isn't always the most popular, the most talkative, or the most expensive. The best is the one who listens to you, truly. Another important element is the therapeutic approach. Psychology includes many schools: psychoanalysis, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, humanistic, Jungian, systemic, and more. None is objectively superior to the others. Each has its tools and its ways of understanding the human experience. Ideally, your therapist should explain how they work, what methods they use, and what the process looks like in that approach. This helps set expectations and builds a more conscious, collaborative path where you are an active participant in your healing. And remember, a good therapist doesn't give ready-made answers. They won't tell you how to live your life. They won't judge your choices. They won't fix your problems. What they will do is walk beside you, helping you understand your feelings, name your experiences, recognize patterns, and build new ways of dealing with pain. They won't carry you, but they'll walk with you. And that kind of presence, as simple as it may sound, can change everything. Choosing a therapist is like opening a door, and every door needs a key, and that key is trust. Trust that you can be yourself. Trust that your pain will be held with care. Trust that someone is truly there to listen and to help you grow. So choose carefully. Choose with intention. Choose with an attentive heart. Because when the right connection happens, the healing journey can finally begin to bloom. There is a common fantasy about the therapeutic process, the idea that it will be immediate, like a pill that dissolves pain in just a few doses. But therapy, especially deep, honest, transformative therapy, is not a sudden miracle. It's a path, a process that is built session by session, word by word, silence by silence. And in the world of online therapy, this is no different. The healing bond doesn't emerge from the first meeting, but from the loving repetition of encounters where listening is constant, care is genuine, and the other's presence is truly felt, even from afar. In the beginning, it's normal to feel a bit awkward. There's a camera between you and the therapist, a screen, headphones, and internet connection. But as the sessions accumulate, something subtle and profound begins to unfold. You start to trust. And when trust is born, so is the inner space to talk about things you've never said, to touch old wounds, to try out new ways of seeing yourself, of feeling, of existing. The consistency of being heard starts to open windows. And even if the outside world remains the same, something inside begins to reorganize. When practiced regularly, online therapy becomes an anchor for emotional life, a safe harbor on hard days, a beacon during confusion, a space where chaos can be named without fear. And this space, contrary to what many believe, doesn't have to be physical to be real. It is built over time. It is built through connection. It is built when the therapist remembers what you shared last week, when they notice the change in your voice, when they see the tiredness in your eyes, even through the screen. That recognition, that presence which holds and walks with you, is what makes the therapeutic process so powerful. With time, online therapy stops feeling like something different and starts becoming part of your routine. It becomes a commitment to yourself, a ritual, a breathing space. Many patients say they begin to look forward to session day as if waiting for a hug, for a pause, for a reunion with something essential. And that regularity, even if weekly, even if bi-weekly, slowly builds an emotional foundation, a stronger inner structure, one that's clearer, more stable, more aligned with who you truly are. Each session brings a discovery, sometimes a big breakthrough, other times a small insight that might seem trivial, but shifts everything within. Sometimes you leave feeling light, other times stirred up, sad, exhausted, and all of that is part of it, because therapy is not a straight line. It's made of cycles, of advances and retreats, of moments of clarity and moments of doubt. But in all these moments, something precious is being cultivated, the ability to see yourself with more truth, more compassion, more autonomy. And as the process unfolds, changes begin to emerge, ones that at first may seem invisible. You react differently to conflict. You notice your feelings more. You say no with less guilt. You begin to recognize patterns. You allow yourself to cry without shame. You listen to yourself. You care for yourself. You begin to reconnect with who you are. And this reconnection is the greatest gift therapy can offer, because it doesn't depend on the therapist or the technology or the method. It begins in the bond with another, but it blooms in the bond with yourself. Transformation then doesn't lie in what the therapist says. It lies in what you begin to notice, to feel, to choose, to build. The therapist is a guide, a mirror, a companion on the path. But the protagonist is you. It always was. It always will be. And with each session, you get closer to your essence. To your past, yes, but also to your future, to the person you are becoming. Session by session, without magic, without rush, without spectacle, just presence, listening, continuity. That is the silent power of online therapy. And maybe, without even noticing, you're already on that path, slowly harvesting the fruits of having chosen to take care of yourself. In a world where we're constantly told that eye contact is essential, it may seem strange to imagine that a deep connection could form between two people separated by a screen. But what has unfolded over the past decades, and even more intensely in recent years, is a silent revolution. Distance, once seen as cold, has become a refuge, and the screen, once a barrier, has become a bridge. Behind every online session are real stories of transformative encounters, of listening that healed old wounds, of care that traveled across miles to bring someone's life back into focus. A 22-year-old woman, living alone in a small town with no close friends, battling anxiety attacks and episodes of panic, found in online therapy the only possible way to seek help. She had no car, no clinic in town, and barely any public transport. It was through the screen that she cried for the first time in months. Through the screen, she said, "I thought I'd never be able to say this to anyone." And the response from the other side, calm, unhurried, respectful, changed everything. A bond was born there, one that knew no physical boundaries. Born was the trust that someone was truly listening. Another story comes from a 64-year-old widower living in a rural area with limited mobility. His daughter, concerned about her father's emotional isolation, arranged for online therapy. He had never been to therapy. He was skeptical of the idea of talking about life to a stranger. But over time, he discovered a space where he could process grief, solitude, and the memories of an entire lifetime. For him, the screen wasn't a barrier, it was protection. It was a place where he could be vulnerable without feeling exposed. "I never thought I could feel so cared for without even leaving home," he said. These stories are not exceptions. They are part of a new reality. A reality where people with tight schedules, small children, physical or emotional limitations finally have access to care. Where therapists can work with clients from different cities, states, even countries. Where language, accent, and cultural identity can be honored. Where care doesn't happen despite the distance, but because of it. And what may surprise the most is that, in many of these cases, what touched patients most wasn't a specific technique, a striking phrase, or an accurate diagnosis. What began their healing, or opened them to it, was something far more subtle: the experience of being listened to with presence, the experience of being validated, of not having to justify themselves, of not being interrupted, of being able to say, "I don't know what I'm feeling," and still be met with kindness, of being contradictory, confused, broken, and still treated with respect. That kind of presence doesn't depend on a room, it doesn't depend on a chair, it doesn't depend on the decor or a warm cup of tea in a cozy office. It depends on listening. And true listening can transcend pixels. It transcends time. It crosses invisible barriers that, for far too long, kept people away from the emotional care they deserved. The screen has become, for many, the only way to say, "I exist, even like this, even with all that I'm feeling, even afraid, even without knowing where to begin." If you still doubt that connection can form through a screen, remember these stories and think about your own. How many times have you just wanted to be heard? How many times have you felt that no one understood you? How many times have you felt ashamed of showing yourself? Distance, when approached with sensitivity, can be the relief you need to take the first step. It can be the safety that makes the beginning possible, because care doesn't require physical presence. It requires emotional availability. And that, thankfully, can cross any boundary. As powerful, accessible, and transformative as it may be, online therapy is not a magical or universal solution. It does not fully replace in-person care in every case, and recognizing its limits is also an act of care, responsibility, and emotional maturity. Therapeutic listening, whether digital or face-to-face, must always honor the context, uniqueness, and complexity of the individual. In certain situations, Human touch, a protected physical environment, or immediate proximity can make a crucial difference. There are clinical cases that require intensive in-person intervention, such as acute episodes of severe psychiatric disorders, imminent suicide risk, psychotic crises, or ongoing domestic violence. In these contexts, the physical presence of a professional team with medical support, emergency infrastructure, and continuous monitoring may not just be important, it may be essential to ensure the person's safety and well-being. No matter how qualified and compassionate an online therapist may be, there are practical limitations that must be respected with ethics and responsibility. There are also cases where the body needs to be physically present in the therapeutic space as part of the healing process. For some people, traveling to the office becomes an important ritual, a moment of preparation, of transition, of physical presence that marks the beginning of a listening journey. Being outside the house in a neutral space can enhance focus, openness, and awareness of one's emotional state. In addition, some therapeutic approaches, such as somatic therapy, certain constellations, EMDR, or integrative techniques, require both therapist and client to be physically present for the experience to be truly effective. Another important factor is the home environment of those seeking online therapy. Not everyone has a safe, quiet, and private space at home to attend sessions. There may be constant interruptions, emotional tension, lack of privacy, or even controlling or abusive situations where the aggressor is nearby. In such cases, the home itself becomes a source of stress, which deeply limits the potential of virtual therapy. For these individuals, the physical office might be the only space where they can truly breathe safely and speak freely. There are also people who simply feel more comfortable with in-person contact. People who value eye contact, a handshake, the shared sensory environment, the silence held together in the same space. For these clients, the therapeutic bond strengthens when they can observe the other person's body language, facial expressions, or the pace of shared breathing. And that's okay. There's no right or wrong way to do therapy, only different paths, and each person should find the one that makes the most sense for their story, their needs, and their moment in life. Acknowledging the limits of online therapy doesn't diminish its value, it enhances it. It's that very awareness that makes the process more ethical, human, and adaptable. We're not facing a battle between in-person and digital therapy. We're witnessing a new possibility, a new language of care, a new space for healing, and this space can coexist with in-person sessions. It can alternate. It can complement. In fact, many clients choose a hybrid approach, combining online and in-person sessions depending on their schedule, emotional state, or the kind of work they want to do. What matters most is that the client feels comfortable, safe, respected, and heard. Yes, the setting plays a role, but what truly transforms is the bond. It's the quality of presence. It's the trust that is built, and that trust can be forged in a physical office or across a screen. A responsible therapist will know when to say, "This needs to be in person," and the client in turn has the right to choose, to try, to adapt. Ultimately, therapy, wherever it takes place, is a space for reconnection with the body, with words, with the past, with the future, and sometimes, to allow that reconnection to happen in its most honest form, we must gently consider where it can best take root, because what's at stake is not the format, it's your emotional life. And it deserves the best space possible to begin again. It's easy to think our actions affect only ourselves. That seeking therapy is a personal decision, limited to our inner world, but that's only half the truth. The full truth is that when one person begins to take care of themselves, they quietly change everything around them. Caring for your mental health isn't just a gesture of survival, it's also an act of collective transformation. Every time someone chooses to listen to themselves, set boundaries, heal their wounds, and step out of autopilot, they're sending a powerful message to the world. It's possible to live differently, and that message, even without words, resonates in the eyes, in the skin, in the way they move. It inspires, it touches, it ignites new possibilities. Imagine a mother who grew up believing she had to handle everything alone, who swallowed her tears, erased herself, and tucked away her pain for the sake of her children. One day she decides to start therapy. At first, she goes quietly, without telling anyone, but little by little, something shifts. She begins to speak more calmly, to get less irritated, to sleep better, to listen more, to say no without guilt. And her children notice. They don't know exactly what's happening, but they feel the home has become lighter. Healing starts to flow. And in a subtle way, this mother is teaching that pain doesn't have to be silenced, that asking for help is allowed, that caring for yourself is an act of love. Now picture a man who's always been closed off, rational, hard on himself. One day he decides to try therapy. He begins to talk about his childhood, the pressures he faced, the fears he never told anyone. Over time, he starts to soften, to show affection, to admit vulnerability. His friends find it strange. His co-workers react with jokes, but deep down they feel something shift, and one of them, in a moment of crisis, remembers the change they saw in that man and chooses to seek help too. And so, care spreads, not as a speech, but as a lived example. This ripple effect of care doesn't happen because you impose it. It happens because you embody it, because you become a new kind of presence in the world, a presence that no longer tolerates abusive relationships, that no longer hides behind masks, that no longer pretends to be fine all the time, that knows how to listen, because you learned to listen to yourself, that knows how to say the right thing, because you learned how to hold yourself in the wrong moment. This change, no matter how small it seems, impacts everyone around you, in how you speak with your family, in how you deal with others in traffic, in how you respond to criticism, in the care you offer, even without noticing. Therapy has this expansive power, and when it happens online, it reaches even more people in more places at more rhythms, and the more people who access this space, the more the world transforms, because a world with more healed people is a world with less violence, less impulsivity, less judgment, less emptiness, and more presence, more listening, more humanity. It may sound idealistic, but it's deeply real. Taking care of yourself is also a political act. It's saying enough to the cycle of inherited trauma. It's stopping the automation of pain. It's changing a destiny that once felt inevitable. And when you change yours, you open the way for others to change theirs too, even if you don't notice, even if you never know. Every time you sit down for a session, even if you're tired, even if you're doubtful, even if you're afraid, you are planting a seed. And that seed may bloom in the eyes of someone who loves you, in the gesture of someone who watches you, in the courage of someone who was about to give up. You never take care of just yourself. For decades, access to therapy was treated as a privilege reserved for a few. Only those with free time, extra money, ease of transportation, and often a certain level of emotional stability could maintain a continuous therapeutic process. The rest of the population, even while carrying deep pain, intense trauma, and silent breakdowns, was left without space, without resources, and without guidance. But what we are witnessing today, as with the rise of online therapy, is a radical redefinition of what accessibility really means. Because accessible now must be more than affordable. It must be possible. It must be human. It must be adapted to the emotional reality of those who need it most. Let's start with time. How many people live overwhelming routines, juggling multiple jobs, young children, household duties, studies, and exhausting commutes? For these people, setting aside a full hour to travel to a therapist's office, wait in a reception room, attend a session, and travel back is simply unworkable, and time, already scarce, becomes an emotional barrier. Online therapy breaks this barrier. It gives people back the right to care for themselves within their own routine, with more flexibility, adjustable schedules, and the freedom to have a session from wherever they are. This transforms the relationship with self-care, because self-care, to be real, must fit into the time you have, not into the idealized time that almost no one possesses. Now think about money. The idea that therapy is always expensive, out of reach, or elitist still keeps thousands of people away. But that's changing. Today, thanks to online platforms, it's possible to find professionals offering sliding scale rates, group sessions, volunteer projects, university clinics, subscription services, customized packages, and a variety of formats that make care more democratic. It's not about undervaluing the therapist's work. On the contrary, it is precisely by expanding access that the profession becomes even more powerful, relevant, and present in people's daily lives. Mental health care shouldn't be a luxury. It must be a right. And what about transportation? In a country where so many regions lack healthcare professionals, where entire cities have no psychologists, where transportation is expensive, unsafe, or non-existent, online therapy is a logistical and emotional miracle. It allows a teenager in a remote town to talk to a therapist from another state. It allows an immigrant in another country to receive support in their native language. It allows someone with limited mobility or undergoing medical treatment to continue their therapeutic journey without leaving home. Care is no longer held hostage by geography. It travels with those who suffer. It adapts. But perhaps the most transformative aspect is emotional safety. Because it's not enough for something to be cheap, fast, and practical, it must also feel safe. And often, home is the only place where someone can truly let their guard down. Cry without fear, speak without judgment. In environments where exposure causes withdrawal, where physical contact triggers emotional responses, where discomfort blocks vulnerability, the screen becomes a shield. It offers a layer of comfort that, far from creating distance, brings closeness. Closeness to feeling, closeness to speaking, closeness to truth. Accessibility then must be thought of in multiple layers. It must consider the real time of those who are overwhelmed. It must respect the budget of those struggling to survive. It must welcome those who cannot, or are not able to, leave the house. It must understand that sometimes what's missing isn't willingness, it's opportunity. And when therapy becomes accessible in all these dimensions, it stops being a distant promise and becomes a living reality. Present, possible. Seeking help cannot depend on luck. It cannot be a privilege, it cannot be an exception. It must be part of life. Like eating, sleeping, breathing, and online therapy is showing that it's possible. It's proving that care can fit inside small screens, tight budgets, short windows of time, and tired hearts. It's showing that no one has to be completely okay to begin, they just need a chance. In a world saturated with emotional content, where motivational quotes flood social media, where videos promise healing in minutes and therapeutic podcasts reach millions, one essential question must be asked. How can we use these digital tools consciously without getting lost in the surface of quick relief? The so-called self-therapy movement, seeking emotional care tools on your own, is indeed valid. It's noble, it's necessary, but it must be approached with discernment, responsibility, and above all, respect for the depth of what we feel. Because some wounds don't heal with likes, and some traumas can't be resolved in a 15-minute video. Technology has gifted us an incredible arsenal of emotional support. We have YouTube channels offering guided meditations, simulated listening sessions, educational videos on anxiety, depression, relationships, and self-esteem. We have podcasts with psychologists, psychiatrists, neuroscientists, authors, and therapists sharing experiences and practical strategies for daily life. We have ebooks, newsletters, Instagram profiles, support forums, and apps for breathing and self-awareness. Access has never been greater, but along with access came a wave of superficiality, compulsive consumption, and the illusion that just listening is enough to heal. It's essential to understand these contents are complementary tools, not substitutes for therapy. They can help you reflect, organize your thoughts, ease momentary symptoms, inspire change, but they don't replace a therapeutic space where the focus is on you, where your story is the center, where there is continuity, depth, and connection. Listening to a podcast about anxiety may offer clarity, but it won't replace the work of understanding why anxiety manifests in you, where in your childhood it took root, what relational patterns it follows, and how it connects to your deepest fears. That deep dive is what therapy offers. At the same time, denying the value of these contents would be naive. For many, a video might be the first step. It might be the sign that says, "I'm not alone," or "There's a name for what I feel." It might be the spark that awakens the desire to seek help. And beyond that, it can be a companion between sessions, a source of comfort on difficult days, a soundscape of empathy while your heart still gathers strength. When used wisely, these resources are a digital embrace. But to experience that, you need discernment. Discernment means knowing how to choose. It means prioritizing reliable sources, trained professionals, and serious approaches. It means being skeptical of those who promise miracle cures, who sell ready-made formulas, who turn suffering into spectacle. It means filtering the content that informs and strengthens you from what merely entertains, or worse, makes you feel worse. And most importantly, it means not using these resources as an excuse to postpone deeper healing, because no matter how soothing a soft voice guiding you through a 10-minute meditation may be, true transformation demands more. It demands presence, it demands commitment, it demands continuity. Another crucial point is the limit of self-service. Many people in deep distress end up drowning in therapeutic content, watching videos on loop, listening to 5 podcasts a day, reading dozens of articles on mental health, and still feeling more confused. That happens because too much information without processing can increase anxiety rather than relieve it. It can lead to harmful comparisons. It can feed the guilt of not being able to do it alone. It can reinforce the belief that you're the only one not improving, and that's not fair to you. You don't have to handle it alone. You absolutely can use digital resources as allies, but the center of care has to be you, not the algorithm. You must listen to what resonates with your story, and that only happens when you learn to pause, to digest, to reflect calmly, and to seek real help when needed. Self-therapy begins when you take responsibility for your own care, but it deepens when you understand that caring for yourself also means knowing how to ask for help. Use the videos, use the audios, use the podcasts, but use them as someone who plants, not someone who runs. Use them as someone building a path, not just patching up holes. Because what you feel is valid, and it deserves more than temporary relief. It deserves real care. It deserves consistent support. It deserves transformation. For much of mental health history, the idea of going to therapy was tied to a very specific profile: people with higher income, free time, advanced education, and living in major urban centers. In other words, therapy was seen as a privilege of the elite, a cultural, geographical, and economic luxury. This created a massive exclusion. While millions suffered in silence, believing their emotional struggles weren't important, or that therapy wasn't for people like them, others continued to benefit from something that should be universal: the right to be heard. But that reality is changing, and it's changing because technology has made what once seemed impossible a reality: democratizing emotional care. With the rise of online therapy, accessible platforms, subsidized sessions, partnerships with NGOs, university clinics, and public health initiatives, thousands of people who would have never stepped into a traditional therapist's office are for the first time being welcomed. They are being heard. They are rebuilding. They are realizing that suffering doesn't belong to any one social class, but care must reach all of them. The number of stories is astounding. People who went decades without even knowing what a therapy session was, who grew up hearing that therapy is for rich people, or that emotional problems can be fixed with faith and willpower. People who were told that men don't talk about their feelings, or that women who complain just want attention. People who only knew pain as part of daily life and learned to survive in silence. Now, through a simple phone and a basic data plan, they find a space where someone says, "I'm listening. Tell me your story." This shift represents much more than a change in format. It represents a change in the social paradigm. Therapy is no longer a symbol of status. It has become a tool for emotional citizenship, for historical reparation, for subjective justice. Because it's not fair that the suffering of a single mother in the outskirts is dismissed as drama, while the suffering of an executive is treated as a clinical emergency. It's not fair that a black youth with depression is labeled lazy, while a white youth is diagnosed and cared for. Emotional care must cross all borders, and online therapy is clearing those paths. Of course, barriers still exist. Access to quality internet remains a challenge in many regions. Stigma around mental health is still alive in many cultures and family systems. The lack of public policies in this area is alarming. But the good news is that there is a growing movement of resistance and reinvention. Community-based psychologists, mental health collectives, Black, Indigenous, and LGBTQIAPN+ professionals, mother therapists, grassroots therapists, virtual therapeutic communities, all of these agents are redefining how care is offered. They're creating listening spaces that honor pain in the right language, at the right pace, with the right gaze. And when someone who's never had access to therapy experiences real care, something powerful happens. Their story begins to be rewritten. Because that person stops carrying alone a weight that was never just theirs. It's generational, it's social, it's cultural. Therapy becomes the place where they can understand where their pain comes from, why they repeat certain patterns, why they feel the way they do, and more importantly, where they can discover that there is another way to live. That numbness isn't their only option. That survival isn't the only path forward. The democratization of emotional care is more than a goal. It's an urgent need, and every new patient who finds a crack in this wall of exclusion is a victory, a light switched on, a broken cycle. Because when listening reaches the places where only silence once lived, healing begins to sprout where it once seemed impossible. And the most beautiful part is that those who heal become seeds of healing for others. They carry what they received into their families, their communities, their children, their peers. That's why therapy must continue to evolve. It must keep moving out of the glass towers and into the streets, the alleys, the countryside, the prisons, the public schools, the favelas, the shelters. And the digital world is one of the most powerful tools in this process, because it doesn't require luxury, it requires connection. And when there is connection, not just internet but human, the impossible begins to transform, one life at a time. There is a new generation being born under blue light, touching screens before they even learn to speak, growing up connected, sharing feelings in real time, and navigating life with their fingertips. These are teenagers and young adults living in a fast, fluid, hyper-exposed world, but contrary to what many believe, they are also deeply wounded. And that's exactly why they are creating a new way to care for themselves, a digital way, direct and emotionally accessible. A way that has made online therapy not an alternative, but the most natural path to support for this generation. For many young people, the idea of talking via video, audio, text, or even through asynchronous platforms isn't strange. It's comfortable. There's no formality, no commuting, no awkward waiting room. For those born into the digital world, online therapy feels fluid, organic, and aligned with their way of being. That doesn't mean their pain is light. Quite the opposite. What this generation feels is heavy, deep, and urgent, but the way they access care must speak their rhythm, their language, their emotional codes. And the suffering of this generation isn't smaller, it's just different. We're talking about teens constantly exposed to comparison on social media, young people growing up under the pressure of instant success, body image expectations, and the fear of public failure. We're talking about people who feel lonely despite thousands of followers, who face identity crises in a world saturated with opinions, who experience mental exhaustion before even turning 20. Mental health has never been discussed more, and at the same time, it's never been so challenging for the young. That's why online therapy has become for many the very first doorway to self-discovery, a space where they can speak their language, where they don't need to over-explain, where the therapist understands that symptoms show up in unread messages, sudden digital disappearances, outbursts in stories, silent breakdowns on seemingly perfect timelines, a space where they can cry without judgment, express contradictions, and deal with the internal chaos they often don't have the words to describe. And most beautifully, where, for the first time, they feel they have the right to care for themselves, even if they're so young. This movement also reveals something powerful. This younger generation is breaking taboos that paralyzed their parents and grandparents. While older generations learned to hide pain, these young people are learning to speak it. While their elders kept quiet out of shame, they are learning to seek help with courage. Even in the midst of so many crises, a seed of transformation is taking root, because by listening to themselves, they are reshaping the emotional future of humanity. They are saying, I don't have to wait until I break to start healing, I can start now. Of course, there is still a long way to go. Many young people still lack access, family support, and basic resources. But support networks are growing, collectives are forming, and digital therapy spaces are multiplying. And all of this points to a hopeful direction. Therapy is no longer a distant, adult, elitist thing. It's becoming part of the emotional, everyday life of a generation that knows that feeling is just as important as knowing. It is up to mental health professionals to learn how to speak with this generation. It is up to the world to listen to them without minimizing their pain. It is up to all of us to understand that this is not about weakness. It's about awareness, about sensitivity, about a request for care that doesn't come in a scream but typed out, not on a traditional couch, but through a pair of headphones in a dark room with a camera on and a heart quietly saying, "I want to be heard." And that changes everything. There are words that carry weight, not because of how they sound, but because of what they mean. "I need help" is one of those phrases. Short, simple, clear, yet it gets stuck in so many people's throats. Saying it requires something few of us were ever taught to offer: vulnerability, emotional humility, the acknowledgement of our own pain. And that's why, even while collapsing inside, many people keep smiling, working, producing, pretending. They keep saying, "I'm fine," while slowly sinking. Because between feeling pain and asking for help, there's a wall made of guilt, fear, pride, shame, and silence. Many of these barriers are learned. We grow up hearing that suffering is a sign of weakness, that those who complain are ungrateful, that life is hard, and that's just how it is, that crying is a waste of time, that therapy is for people who have nothing better to do. These ideas, repeated across generations, become internal voices that sabotage us. "You're overreacting. It's nothing. This will pass." And the problem is that while we try to convince our mind that everything is under control, the body keeps collecting symptoms. The soul starts to shrink. Life begins to lose color. And still, many keep saying, "I can handle it," even when everything inside is crying out for help. Another obstacle to asking for help is the fear of judgment, the fear of being seen as weak, unstable, or problematic, the fear of disappointing others, the fear that people will pull away once they realize you're not as strong as you seem. This is especially common for those who have always been the pillar of the family, the friend who helps everyone, or the professional who holds everything together. For them, admitting they need help feels like betraying an image they worked so hard to build. But what they haven't yet understood is that asking for help doesn't destroy your strength. It reveals a deeper kind of strength, the strength to be real. There's also the barrier of pride, the belief that handling everything alone is a sign of merit, intelligence, maturity. But there's a huge difference between autonomy and isolation. Being autonomous means being able to choose. Being isolated means you can no longer ask. And when pride becomes an obstacle to care, it stops being a virtue and turns into armor. An armor that weighs you down, that suffocates you, that blocks touch, care, and listening. An armor that keeps the pain trapped inside a body that just wants to breathe in peace. And then there's shame. Shame for feeling what you feel. Shame for being hurt, abandoned, betrayed, abused, fired, humiliated. Shame for not being in control. But it's precisely in therapy that shame can be healed. Because therapeutic listening is a space where you don't have to justify your existence, where everything you are, even the parts you hide, has a place, has value, has meaning. And when that's truly experienced, something begins to shift. Fear turns into courage. Silence turns into speech. Collapse turns into a beginning. Saying, "I need help," is one of the bravest acts in life because it opens the door to the new. It brings pain out of the dark. It bursts the bubble of loneliness. It unlocks the bridge between you and the care you deserve. It doesn't have to be said out loud. It can be written. It can be a click. It can be a short message. "Can you listen to me?" And that's enough, because asking for help doesn't require a spectacle. It just needs an opening, a gesture, a yes. If you feel you need help but haven't been able to ask for it, know this: you are not alone. Thousands of people are fighting this same invisible battle every single day. But each person who dares to cross that barrier is clearing a path for others. They are telling the world that it's possible to be strong through tears, that it's possible to ask for help with dignity, that it's possible to live with more truth. And you can be one of them, not because you failed, but because you chose to care for yourself, and that changes everything. If there's one thing this time has taught us, it's that pain doesn't wait for the perfect moment. Pain doesn't ask if you have time, money, or emotional stability. It simply arrives, sometimes subtly, sometimes like a storm. And when it does, what a human being needs, before advice, before solutions, before explanations, is to be heard, truly heard, with attention, with presence, with sincerity. heard in a way that makes them feel their existence matters. And that's why online therapy isn't just a trend, it's a response. A living, human, sensitive response to a world that suffers in silence. You might not feel ready. You might not know where to begin. You might feel ashamed to talk about what you're feeling. You might worry you'll freeze, that you'll cry, that you won't be able to explain. But all of that is part of the process. Therapy, whether online or in person, doesn't ask for perfection. It doesn't expect you to be whole. It only asks that you show up with your truth, even if that truth feels broken. Because that's where healing begins. And if you still hesitate because you think the screen creates distance, let me tell you, the screen doesn't block connection. It enables it. It protects, it holds. It offers the silence you need, the freedom to speak what has never been said, the chance to build a bond without the pressure of a physical setting. And in that digital space made of pixels and voice, thousands of lives are being cared for. Thousands of stories are being rewritten. Thousands of people are, for the first time, looking at themselves with compassion, listening to themselves with courage, honoring themselves with depth. You don't need to justify your pain to deserve care. You don't need a diagnosis to be embraced. You don't need to hit rock bottom to begin. You only need to allow yourself. Allow yourself to be human. Allow yourself to feel. Allow yourself to seek help before the pain becomes a collapse. And if that help comes through a screen, so be it. Because what matters is not the medium, it's the connection, it's the listening, it's the affection that crosses the distance and touches where no one else has. Online therapy is the space where you can exist as you are, where there is no right or wrong, where there is no judgment, where the only rule is respect. And maybe for the first time you'll realize that there is a place for you in this world, a safe place, a place where your questions can exist without rush for answers, where your silences are heard, where your story has worth. You deserve to be heard, even if it's through a screen, even if your voice trembles, even if everything in you still doubts. Because within the therapeutic process, it doesn't matter how you arrive. What matters is that you do. And once you arrive, you'll discover that you are not alone. You never were. There has always been somewhere someone ready to listen, someone who won't try to fix you, but who will walk with you as you rebuild. This is the beginning of a new journey, a journey of reconnection, of care, of truth, and that journey begins when you choose not to give up on yourself.